Welcome or welcome back to the Light Renegades. My name is Starr. Thank you for joining me today, everyone. I feel like I'm not ready for this. I feel like I have been putting this off for the longest time. And I think that I've gotten to a point in my journey where I just have to face it all again, and come to putting some things to a full close. And I think that the time for that is now. I've been asking for expanse this whole entire time, and granted, I have been healing along the way, but I think there has just been this section of me that I've just been avoiding in this space for many reasons, up until this point. So apologies, the hair is wet. I thought if I don't just sit down and film this, I just might never do it. And I know somewhere that this is holding me back. I know somewhere, there are people around me that have been holding my past against me. So I want to share my story. So, there's no more room for discussion. Behind the scenes is what I want to share. And this is my interpretation of my life as I've been living it. I know that I probably will offend someone somewhere, and that's not my intention. But this is my life, and this is how it's felt for me. I want to start by saying, I love my family implicitly. I love all of the friends that I've met along the way implicitly. You have taught me the most lessons. And, I'm going to try and make this make sense. But I think that it perhaps won't make sense to some degree, somewhere to you, unless you've perhaps been similar circumstances or, I think perhaps met certain understandings that I have along the way. So this is going to be me speaking about my life thus far. I think coming to terms with being a starseed somewhere is going to come into this, but I think it's about sharing what my experience has been like as a human being here, and how difficult that's been for me. And I'm just going to speak, I haven't made any notes for this. I find it difficult to make notes and then have things come through authentically. So I'm just going to speak and trusting that what comes forward is everything that I need to share today. I don't know if there'll be, part 2s, 3, 4s on this. I'm not sure. But I just wanted to, express how my life has come to be right now. So from a very young age, I was very much a happy child, so I'm told. And I have a family that loved me, that really took care of me. And it was in a space that I think that I was in a bubble of love, such great love. My mom is one of many siblings, so I had amazingly strong, beautiful women around me as aunties, and their children and all of that kind of stuff, and that really put me in a bubble that didn't really I don't know how to say it. I feel like I got plopped into the real world, and it was just pain from the get-go. But now looking back, I realized that the pain truly was starting at home. I'm an only child, and I've grown up with a very difficult father who has definite narcissistic tendencies somewhere. And we've had a very toxic and challenging relationship my entire life. And I think I'm having to come to terms with just how much that's played a part in my fabric of my understanding and me. And I was in and out of therapy for this for many years, alongside many other things which I will go into in a moment. But I was starting to see where the molding of me happened very, very young. And upon coming back home, I'm in my family home. I've been in my family home this whole time, filming these videos for you all. This mural behind me was painted by my very first long-term boyfriend. So I've had a very up against it understanding of my life again, and looking back, I can see how it's all shaped me. So I've been told of many stories of when I was too small to have an opinion, too small to perhaps be feeling as strongly as I did about things, and screaming at the top of my lungs to telling my father to shut up and leave my mom alone. And while my father has never been physically abusive to my mom, I think that he has been verbally manipulative and abusive. So this is what I experienced in my home. And my parents are still together today. They've been together since they were 14. So, you know, there's been a whole lot of other issues that was theirs that I've been involved in from a very young age. And somewhere along this journey, you know, this very happy, very outspoken child then became this very quiet and very insular child somewhere. And then I was plopped into, you know, the real world. I started to go to nursery, all of those types of things you guys might call it, kindergarten, depending where you were. And, you know, I was bullied. I was bullied from very early on. So my mother comes from a Black Jamaican heritage. My dad is white. We have an Irish heritage in there as well somewhere. And, you know, I got to primary school and I wasn't darker skinned enough for the Black kids to accept me. So they ostracized me. And back then, you know, I had my natural hair. I had big curly, really, really curly ringlet hair. And I had light eyes, and they did not like this about me. So by the people that, you know, I would consider to be my family, I was raised very closely with my mom's family over my father's family. So people that I would consider to be family, you know, same ancestral background somewhere, ostracized me. They didn't like me because I wasn't particularly, well, dark-skinned enough for them. So I experienced, you know, racial bullying from a very young age, which was something that was very difficult to understand and grasp, because I think I truly hadn't even acknowledged my own skin color somewhere. And I think this is because I do see everyone as one, of course, but I think that I just felt very different from my family. And, you know, the way that my life panned out, it was very much you're very different. You know, this was always something that I was told. I was very different. And I wasn't interested in the same things that, you know, my family had been interested in, or I just kind of went a different way than I think a lot of my family expected of me. So went through primary school, you know, had bullying in there. I was sent to Catholic primary school because it was a good primary school. And, you know, I did meet some beautiful souls along the way. I cannot deny that. But the majority of that understanding for me somewhere was that, you know, I was bullied, and that was phase one of many phases of the breaking down of me. Aside from coming from a home that was incredibly toxic, I was pushed between two parents that, you know, were children. I think that having children back in the day, you know, causes for a lot of trauma, and you can't get away from that. And my parents love me, you know, I've never gone without. That is just not the case, and they tried their best, and I love them for that. But it has been something that, you know, has shaped me, and it's been painful somewhere. So going through primary school, you know, feeling different and ostracized and not really knowing where to fit in, you then move into secondary school, and it felt very much the same. And, you know, I was bullied again, but in a very different way. I started to, you know, hit puberty, and all of your body changing, all of that side of stuff comes into play. And I think this was at the point when my eating disorders started, because I think I started to feel all these changes in my body. And now, knowing what I know now, I think this comes hand in hand with this idea of the negative reptilian forces and an awakening in that somewhere. But I think that's a story for another day. So I hit, you know, the starting of puberty, and I, you know, began to blossom into a woman somewhere physically, you know. And I think I started to see how that changed people's perspective of me. I think my father didn't know what to do in that, and he completely just pushed me away. And somewhere I felt rejected, you know, from the home. And that panned out into my life too. I was stuck between two parents that were very individually troubled. Bless them. I think everyone has their own trauma that they bring into any situation, and I was put between the two of them. And very much I had to grow up pretty young, you know. I don't feel like I had a full childhood somewhere, and, you know, apologies to any family that might eventually watch this, because I know that you all tried and you all protected me. And, you know, I've had some very significant family members that have been, you know, a complete pillar for me and completely saved my life somewhere. And I kind of can't go into too much because of the work that this person does, but you know, I'm very grateful for them. So I have had pillars this whole time, you know, keeping me safe, trying to keep me alive is what I want to share. So I hit secondary school and puberty started to happen. I started to see the way that people were affected by me. And, you know, someone came up to me that I did actually go to primary school with, and they said, you know, I bullied you because I was jealous of you. And I was very grateful for them stepping forward and saying that at that time, because I really needed to hear it, because it was the starting of, you know, my self-understanding just absolutely nosediving. I was silenced as a child, you know, I was taken away from spaces of being creative, of, you know, expressing myself as a very emotional child, and having a father that couldn't cope with any emotion. It was everything I did was too much. Everything I did was never enough. It was always a pushing and pushing and striving to be better at school, to get better grades. You know, I love learning. I was a proper nerd. I love learning. I tried my best. But even if I got 99.9% on a test, it'd be like, why did you not get 100? You know, all of these things were drilled into me from such a young age. So I had all of this energy just brewing inside of me, you know, trying and striving to be good. I felt somewhere that I was having to walk on eggshells my whole entire childhood. And, you know, I've had to deal with understanding that that is toxic somewhere from both parents. You know, I had a mother that was training me to acknowledge narcissistic behavior and work around that, so molding myself to fit in with that, so I wasn't causing my father upset, so, you know, we could have an easy night without him complaining or shouting or all of these types of things. So that was slowly building, bubbling under the surface. I get to secondary school, hit puberty, and I start to blossom, you know. I start to get attention from boys. The girls don't like that. I think somewhere the boys didn't know how to I guess, control me in some ways. So I started to be bullied at school as well in some circles. And that had a massive effect on me. And I think somewhere a switch just flicked. And it was like, I can't even describe it because I don't exactly know when it happened, but it was like a darkness just took over. And in this time, you know, I definitely know that within the space of me being at school somewhere, I said, you know, Lucifer, come and save me. And I was at Catholic school again. I went to Catholic school again, although I haven't been brought up as Catholic. My mum's side is very heavily Christian somewhere, so I've grown up praying, that type of thing. You know, I prayed to God. I wasn't sure exactly what I believed in, but I said it was God because this feeling that I had, you know, all of my family was saying that it was God, and I felt something when I prayed. So I think I got to the point of feeling like, if God is real, why am I in so much pain? Why do people, you know, cause me so much pain when all I've tried to do is be good? And, you know, I think this is something that I really took on as a persona. It's like, I need to be good. I need to be good. I was walking on eggshells at home. I learned that from a very young age, you know, from watching my mum with my dad. It was like, don't do things to upset, you know, what's happening right now in the household. So I tried to be good to not upset the family dynamic any more than it was already destructive. And I think somewhere I just snapped, and I didn't want to be good anymore because I felt like it had gotten me nowhere. And, you know, this is when I started drinking. This is when I started like hanging out with, you know, more friends, and I did have a great time along all of side of all of this that was happening. You know, I've had some amazing friends along the way that have truly shaped me and, you know, really supported me and brought me out of my shell for sure. Because I just shrank in as a very young child. I started to not express myself because my father didn't know what to do with it. And then, you know, I cut off all of my considered to be beautiful hair, you know, back at that time, because I felt like I was rebelling against something, you know. I felt like I didn't want to be this good girl anymore. I think I just snapped and I thought, it's gotten me nowhere. I'm going to reject this. And I think somewhere I couldn't quite cope with the attention that I was getting from, you know, boys at the time. I think I felt overwhelmed by that. And I could see that it was making other girls jealous. It was making my friends jealous somewhere. And that's happened the entirety of my life. And you know, that's not me, I don't know, trying to say I'm amazing in any way. That's just what's happened. And I didn't understand it because I was always very conscious of trying to be a team player. You know, I tried to be so nice to everyone. And granted, you know, there was lessons along the way that we all have to learn. when we are growing up, but I really try to just be inclusive of everyone, and I try to just be nice to everyone. I didn't have hate in my heart towards anyone, but I felt like people had hate in their heart towards me. So there was a snapping that happened, and I started drinking, all of that type of stuff, and this darkness just took over me. And this is when I started to, not eat. I started to worry about what I looked like. I started to feel like I wasn't worthy somewhere. And I cut all my hair off. My father, I remember specifically my father turning around and telling me that I was ugly, and I'd unbeautified myself somewhere because I started to get piercings. I cut off all my hair. I got like an undercut. I had a very short cropped bleach blonde bob, at this time, and that takes a knock too somewhere when you haven't even fully formed yourself in the world and understanding you. And I guess I consider your father to be your first relationship, and that might be a warped understanding somewhere, but that's how I kind of view it. So the first person as a masculine that I loved was rejecting me from what felt like day one. So a pattern then started to ensue. I started to attract people that would pull on my energy. I started to attract people that wanted to take something from me, because I think somewhere I came across as vulnerable, somewhere I came across as weak, because I was. And I guess I was naive somewhere to think that I was always trying to see the best in everyone, because I think that I was trying to be good. And I think I was just always hoping for things to get better. So I wasn't seeing the true understanding of every situation throughout my lifetime, because I think somewhere it was too much for me to bear, that darkness does exist, and the envy and the anger and the shame in other people exists. So I think I was just rejecting a lot of the truths of how the world works, because it just felt so painful to me to accept that somewhere. So I started to take on, I believe, all of this dark energy. I started to harbor it inside, and I started to feel like I was evil. And somewhere along this path, and I think my awakening too, I started to really take a nosedive into self-harm. So I'd already stopped eating at this point. So I was getting smaller by the day. Life gets very confusing when you're not eating for long periods of time. You kind of don't live in this reality. It was very much a distorted understanding of everything. There's a fabric of existence you flick into that is just on autopilot. And I was in that space for a really long time. I don't know how I made it through school. I don't know how I studied. I don't know how I made it through that time. Because it was really bad. It got to the point where I was going to be hospitalized, because it was like, if you do not start to eat now, you will die. And, I always took it to the edge, and I always made it through. I did start to eat again. I did start to, go to therapy and start to try and heal that side of me. But this darkness was still there. And I remember specifically going to therapy and saying, I feel like there is, we equated how I felt to the Grim Reaper. I was like, I feel like the Grim Reaper is here. And, how I feel about me and my life, I don't know where it comes from. And I think there is a whole other layer of understanding attached to all of this. But I was just really struggling. I was really struggling to keep afloat. I was really struggling to stay here. And, self-harming in all manner of ways at this point. And alcohol started to be used, and eventually I then moved into drugs when I found drugs, and that was a way for me to gain some of this I guess energy back that I felt like I'd lost. I felt like I wasn't truly here unless I was high to some degree somewhere. And I felt like I'd never been able to reach parts of happiness that other people seemed to reach. And this is from very young, we're talking like 11, this all started for me. So from probably about 10 or 11, there was just a numbness that happened with my life, and I didn't know how to bring myself back from that. And I just continued. This then span into my teen years, this span into my 20s, the drug use continued. I then started to work, forward-facing public service roles. I got into hospitality, so I was around alcohol a lot. I worked in a lot of pubs. I worked in a lot of bars in my time, and just the cycles just kept continuing, and I think I started to flip the script of where I find myself. Like I said, I was, not wanting to be good anymore because that hadn't gotten me anywhere. And I think that's when, I started to care less about specifically the male race somewhere. And, I had been used. So I started to use them. And I thought that this was okay. And, I see that it's not okay. I understand where I was perpetuating a cycle of upset somewhere. And I just found myself in a lot of spaces, getting into a lot of trouble somewhere, and this whole time I still wasn't eating properly. I was still going to therapy, but nothing was quite, I think, getting to me. And I think there was a whole high level of understanding about this. But I think that anytime, I kind of got into my life and what had been happening, I just felt like there was something else that I didn't know what was going on, but I could feel it. And I was like, I don't know how to bring myself out of this darkness, So my 20s continued. I was very lost. I've never known what I wanted to do with my life. I just kept falling into job after job after job. And, then I would get bored and then I would leave and then I'd fall into something else. And I just love partying. Like, I'm not going to try and beat around the way that is, and I'm not condoning that lifestyle, but I felt like in the spaces of meeting other people that were struggling too, that, I would have the most expansive conversations with, I really started to understand others, and feel like I'd found my tribe somewhere. And, this is all very wounded people getting together and trying to make sense of a world that truly doesn't make sense. And granted, there's some quite toxic things involved, but somewhere it felt like home. And the only time that I felt good was when I was, completely off of my face somewhere. And I now understand that because I'm getting to those spaces without needing, drugs or alcohol, but I didn't know how to do that back then. But I was feeling these higher understandings, somewhere. I felt like I was just hitting points of happiness that I couldn't induce within my own self because I just felt under this blanket of darkness, under this blanket of pain for the longest time. So I started to, meet other souls that enjoyed the things that I did. And, we all tried to cope in those spaces together. And then I think eventually it was getting to the point where I wanted to start making, concrete decisions about how I wanted to live my life. And I decided to go to university, and, I managed to quit drugs to go to university. And I found other souls that were starting to appreciate who I was. And I think that, you're put through schooling, you have to do all of these things that you don't necessarily want to do. I hated maths, I loved art, all of those types of things, and I enjoyed learning, I really did. But I think the structuring of how school works doesn't work for everyone. And, I struggled within that somewhere. I still got good grades. I honestly do not know how I did. Probably divine intervention with that one. But when I got to university, it was the first time that I was able to truly get into the spaces that I wanted to explore. And you started to be treated like an adult. And I realized like my whole entire life, I was very much put in, this encased in cotton wool, I think that they say. And I was protected, and I was catapulted out into the world. And then I started to see how other people behaved, and it shocked me. I think that I went into shutdown mode and I didn't know what to do. And somewhere I was just terrified of life, completely terrified of life. I started to just act on impulse, which has been completely destructive for me. I've accumulated so much karma in that time. I know that. I've been having to work through that, later years of my life. So I go to university, I start to meet souls that are expressing themselves in different ways. I started to be a bit more expressive within myself, but I still was really struggling with my eating disorders. And that's been the majority of my struggle. And that still continued, through my life. I left university, I came back to my hometown, I didn't know what I was going to do. And, then you find yourself in situations and getting into relationships because you just want to escape the pain somewhere. And I was just consistently numbing this pain in this cycle of, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know why I'm here, I don't know what any of this is all about. I didn't understand life. I didn't understand how anyone was happy here. I was like, I just don't know how to do this. So I lived in this void. I lived in this darkness. I lived in this void. I lived in this void of hurting myself consistently somewhere by not, by not honoring my body, by not feeding my body what it needs, and just by running on impulse, it felt like. So cut to, I guess, having to truly make another understanding of where I want to go in my life. And I've mentioned this before, but when I was at university, I started to do film and screen studies. No, I did film and media, and I didn't like the courses that I was on. Well, film, media, and sociology. I loved doing the media, but I hate doing the sociology. And I actually applied to go to makeup school, and I never sent that application off. So this is way back, at the beginning of my university years. And then it cut to however many years later, I decided that I want to go and train and to be a makeup artist. And I've forgotten that I actually sent this application off back then. And there was a part of me at that time when I felt like I was having to prove something to my father. So I think that I stayed at university because I wanted to prove to him that I wasn't stupid, that, I had brains and that I could do something. And I enjoyed my time there. I definitely did it for me. I switched courses. I did film and screen studies course, and I loved it. I did love my time at university, but it was definitely a space where I was still in a lot of pain. I was still in therapy that whole time, and I've had amazing therapists that have really helped me. And it's been in stages, my healing with regards to all of that, and I was potentially, getting to the space of being the healthiest that I've been, but I was still struggling. I was still consuming a lot of alcohol. I was still not eating 100% as healthily as I could. And this pain was still just there, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. So I decided that I want to, train to be a makeup artist again. So I then go back to school, I go back to college, and I feel like I'm expressing myself again at a deeper level of, artistry and understanding. And I think that I was fooling myself to think that I was in a better space than I was. And I think I've done this my whole entire life. I think I've just been trying to be like others. So somewhere I've been, trying to mold myself to be more like how other people live, without truly understanding what that means, or truly understanding how I was truly feeling. And so many moments along that way, there has been awakenings within me that really snapped me back into reality to say, you need to really look after yourself. And I've always pushed myself to the edge. There has been many circumstances on this path where I've been in a whole harem of distorted situations, and and it was getting to the point where I was getting blackout drunk, not remembering where I'd been, where I'd how I'd gotten into the space that I have with another person next to me. And that's just not a safe space to be in as a woman. And I don't know a woman out here right now which doesn't have a story of being sexually abused somewhere. And it's a very sorry state that we are living in right now. And this is by no means saying that I've had the worst time, and this is not a worries me story. I'm just trying to share what I've been through so that I can feel like I'm setting myself free somewhere. So all of these situations slowly but surely started to accumulate, and I was just getting worse and worse somewhere with regards to looking after myself, and then trying to continually prosper and gain some sort of stability in this fabric of existence. So I trained to be a makeup artist. I then don't do anything with that. I go back to work in hospitality. I get myself into a whole harem of trouble again in those spaces, very much acting out of impulse, not thinking about other people's feelings when I'm engaging with them. I've cheated on every single boyfriend that I've ever had my whole entire life because I was just terrified of true connection, true commitment somewhere. I felt unlovable this whole time. I didn't have any sense of self, truly. And yeah, I think I've just been utterly disgusted with myself and my body for the longest time. I think there was a layer of this understanding connecting to being a starseed somewhere. I very much didn't understand my physical body. I remember I would look at my arm and I would think, I don't like the feeling of my skin on my bones, which is, a very difficult thing to try and explain. So I think there's been multiple layers to where I found myself in my life, but they've played out in such a way that has been very 3D somewhere, and I'm trying to just explain that today. So cut to living in London as a makeup artist, seemingly having got into the best position that I have in my life thus far, still struggling somewhere, still, drinking alcohol, drug abuse, that type of thing. And then the lockdown happened. And, before this, I was starting to awaken to this idea of that there was something else happening. And the day that I moved to London, I remember looking at the clock and it said 1818. And that was the first time that I looked at, angel numbers, synchronistic numbers, anything like that. And then I was just bombarded by these numbers on arriving in London. It was just like day in, day out. I was like, why am I seeing all of these numbers? And that's when I think that I truly started to awaken to, I've got full body shivers, of who I was at a soul's level. And it was this awakening, I was trying my best this whole time to get better, to, honor myself, honor my vessel. And I think that's when Teams of Light thought, okay, we can try and step in a little bit more now because she's ready to make that shift. So this has been a long process of my awakening. And lockdown happened and, I was still seeing friends, in the spaces that we were allowed out of those little pockets and, still getting into trouble, still misusing drugs. It's all misuse of drugs, I guess, but still, not looking after myself. And I thought, I'm in the middle of, all of this craziness that is happening and I'm still not looking after myself. Something has to change. And I decided to quit drinking. That came first. That came easier. And, alcoholism runs in my family. My grandmother from my father's side died of being an alcoholic, so there's always been this undercurrent of me knowing that alcohol hasn't been the best for me, and I wasn't a good drunk. I was not a happy drunk. The window of being a happy drunk was very, very small for me, and then I would get blackout drunk, or I would be incredibly difficult to be around. I was incredibly emotional. I was incredibly violent at times, and this has been a problem my whole life, and I've very much upset some people in my life that, I like to think that I've been able to make amends with to some degree with all of those situations. I like to think that I've managed to, say my apologies when they've been due, but that was a difficult pill to swallow. It was a difficult pill to look at myself and say, somewhere you gave up on yourself and you started to act out because you felt upset with your life, and that's upsetting other people. And, there has been so many people that have been, I guess, collateral in that somewhere, and I'm grateful for them being on my path and being on my journey, and I learned so much through those situations, and I hope they did too. And bless my poor ex-boyfriends. If any of you are watching, I put you through hell, quite literally. I know that. I tried my best to be a good girlfriend, to love you, but I truly didn't have that capacity then. And there is so many situations that I could go into in great depth, but I think that that's just trauma dumping at this point. I think I've gone into as much detail as I need to, but I've had to make amends. I've made some massive mistakes along the way, and all because I was just self-sabotaging somewhere and hurting myself because I didn't feel worthy to be here. And I think that that's been something that I'm still working through on this path. And it's been difficult, so this past month and a half, I've been really having to look at my past again. That has been incredibly painful, and come and face it. So, the lockdowns happened. I decided to stop drinking. Drugs then came on the back of that too. And I was awakening to angel numbers, to feeling something else, and I started to meditate, and that's when I started to go somewhere else, and I thought, there's something here. I don't know what this is, but there's something here. And then a very beautiful and dear soul that I happened to meet down by, when I was working in London, they were very heavily into their crystals, and, they got me into understanding crystals, and I brought crystals on and off along my years. I'm not really truly knowing what all of that meant. And then they said, why don't you try Reiki? And I tried Reiki. I was realizing that I was having to heal myself. My mind was chaos. My heart was just non-existent. And I truly was still hating myself, somewhere. So I started to try Reiki. I trained in Reiki level 1 to heal myself. And that's when I started to truly feel better somewhere, alongside meditating and starting to come to a space of peace that I've never felt before. But I think somewhere this layer of darkness has still been set over me. And you will have all watched, the Darkness series. There has been a lot of purging of myself through that series. To those that are here, I think right now you've been watching for the longest time. And, to those that might find this video have no idea what I'm talking about, you can go and start the Darkness series to kind of understand what all of that means for me. But that's a construct of my own consciousness I'm starting to have to understand, somewhere. And there was so much darkness that has just plagued my life, that has just washed over my life for the longest time, and it's just been painful. So I started to train in Reiki, and I was healing myself. I started to really have to confess my sins, and take ownership for where I find myself. And I was unhappy in a relationship. It wasn't quite going the way that I wanted it to. I was expressing that all of these aspects of self were opening up, and this person didn't want to take that leap with me. Somewhere I think we were incredibly toxic, but this person taught me a lot, and I really did love them somewhere, and I hope that they know that. But I think that I was having to just step out alone, because I needed to love myself. And it's been a long journey of that. I'm still in that right now. And I think that I've just been avoiding bringing all of this forward because it felt like too much. I think I felt like I didn't know where to even begin. And this is not a woe is me space. I've not had the worst life, like I promise you. And my family have tried their best. We weren't the wealthiest family at one point, but we've managed to get by. We've managed to, get through anything that has come up for us as a family. But it's been a really deep healing, and coming back home to my hometown, the lockdowns happened. We came out of lockdown. I was training my Reiki, and I didn't know what to do. My relationship broke down, and I left London and I came home, and that's where you found me. I started to tap into deeper aspects of all of this life, and I was still training to be a Reiki master. And I'd already done one mediumship course while I was down in London. I continued to do another one once I hit back in my hometown. And I had to come home, and I had to face my life, my parents, my family, and express to them where I found myself in my journey, awakening to all of these aspects of other, of ether. And to my surprise, my family started to open up and share what they had experienced in their life with regards to other and spirits and entities, and that has been a constant in my life. But I think that I just considered it to be normal. I guess I've been brought up in, all these Catholic understandings, and prayer has always been there for me. So I found that easy to just make my reality somewhere. But I think the things that I was bringing forward to my family, were pretty expansive when I start to talk about extraterrestrials, that type of thing. And not truly understanding who I am now and awakening to that. But there's been a layer of all of this that I think I've been still avoiding somewhere, because it's just been too difficult to look at. And teams of light haven't really given me too much as to why I'm specifically here and what I've been doing. So I've honestly been working in the dark, everyone. And I think that this comes as a surprise to some when I share that to them. And, I woke into being a starseed. I was told to start to create this channel, in that time. I was brought forward, my two Pleiadian brother and sister in that space, Anna Maria being one of them, who is the other light renegade that has come forward right now doing the Getting Started series in the Polarity Paradox, working with the Pleiadian High Council and her, intuitive understandings at this time. And that has changed the fabric of my understanding somewhere. And, they have been like family to me, a family and a love that I couldn't fully express or understand. And I'm so grateful for that. But I think there is this whole other aspect of life that I've been slowly trying to comb through, and, trying to make amends for my past whilst being back in my hometown somewhere. I've upset a lot of people in my life. I know that. And I've been having to hold my hands up and say, I was wrong, and I've been out hurting people because I was hurt. And, hurt people. And that is just the truth. I feel like no one wishes to truly hurt someone at their core. And I think we all have to face that truth too. So I hope that this has shed some light on where I've been and how I've come to be right now. I'm not sure if this is going to do any of my story justice, or, I guess it's going to open up more questions somewhere for myself as well, to bring my understanding to deeper clarity. But I think that I've just been in the dark for the longest time, and now I'm just ready to put that to bed. I want to put my past to bed. I like to think that I've made the most amount of amends as I could on this journey somewhere, and I think I want to put this weight down. I'm ready to put my past not necessarily behind me, because it's still a part of me somewhere, but I don't want it to be ruling my life. I don't want it to be taking over my spaces now and hindering me feeling like I can support others. I think somewhere I felt like I had to be more together and healed on this path to be able to support people. And I think this is me sharing that you can be anyone and still be accepted into the light. You can be anyone and still be reaching these higher layers of expanse. I was not expecting this path whatsoever. Like I said, I started to try and heal myself. I knew I had to heal myself, and I knew that going through therapy just through the mental mind alone wasn't going to be enough, and I didn't understand that at that time. But I've been in and out of therapy for the entirety of my life, yet there was just this other layer that I wasn't able to understand or bring into the forefront. And when I started to do Reiki, I started to be able to work with the energy of my body that we're not told about. And I was realizing that there was just so much that was just wound around me so tight from the past that I was having to release at an energetic level. And this has gone in layers. This has not been a linear path. Healing is not linear, and I'm having to circle back again so I can look at it all from a new layer, a higher perspective than I have been, and to find my grace and my healing within that. But I am having to look at my past and say, this is where I've come from, and to not be ashamed of that. I think somewhere I've always been ashamed of where I've come from. I come from a very I don't even know how to make it make sense to most of you in the US, but I come from what's called a council estate in the UK. So it's not a very affluent area. There was a lot of gun crime, there was a lot of drug crime, there was a lot of death surrounding the space where I live. It's known as one of the most violent spaces to live in at some point in my space of existing in the 90s. And yeah, it was very much I was ashamed of where I come from. I wouldn't tell people where I lived because I just didn't want them to know, because I would be judged, and that's just how it was. And I think something else I want to circle back around into is this idea of, my race and who I am. And being mixed race has been difficult, and understanding what my family have gone through on my mother's side in terms of racism and what they've gone through has just been the most horrific thing to sit and listen to, and to understand that ancestrally I'm connected to somewhere. And my whole life I've been, I think, fighting against my own race, because I wasn't accepted as being mixed at some point, and it wasn't cool. At some point celebrities have come along and they've made it cool, but it wasn't cool to be mixed raised in the 90s. I felt very much left out, and the way that I went in terms of my I guess interests and all of that type of stuff is that I went to the alternative side of things. I started getting tattoos, I started getting piercings, and I very much wanted to have jet black straight hair and be as pale as a ghost. Like, that was what I wanted, and I was the complete opposite of that. I was very light skinned, but still olive skin, tan skin somewhere. Although I'm completely mixed race, I've always had a light complexion, which has put me in a very strange position. Like I said, I was ostracized and bullied by my own race, my own family somewhere, and then I also was kind of put into a space of people not knowing that I was of race somewhere. I think being just not learned enough in that space, and me having to listen to racial comments that aren't of the highest vibration, and me not acknowledging that is hurting me somewhere, and sometimes in some spaces not feeling like I could speak up about that because I didn't want to be left out. So there's been many layers to this idea of me just not feeling worthy somewhere, and I'm having to face it all again now. There is aspects of myself that I'm having to look at again and go deeper into that, because somewhere my heart still hasn't been fully open. And I have hurt people along this path, but I promise you I've always tried to include everyone, because I felt so ostracized. I've always loved people, you know. And I think that some people might be very surprised to know that I was very unhappy for the longest time, because I always had a smile on my face. You know, I've done very public forward facing roles the whole of my life, so I know a lot of people in my hometown, a lot of people know who I am. And I always had a smile on my face. You know, granted, there were some spaces where people have seen me, you know, high as a kite, disheveled in some spaces, but I think I always had a forward face of I'm okay when I just truly wasn't okay. And I'm grateful to those souls that have, you know, picked me up along the way. I've met some amazing people on my path that have really shaped me, really guided me, and really just been those pillars to bring me back so that I didn't just end it all. So many times I was faced with, you know, you're not going to make it through this if you don't eat, if you don't stop, you know, doing what you're doing, if you don't stop taking drugs, because I genuinely shouldn't be here. The amount that I wasn't eating and the years that that went on for, and the amount of drugs that I took in that time, I don't know how I'm still here, which is, I know, is why, you know, this is part of my path and it's been part of my journey. And there's been, you know, soul contracts along that time that I've been, you know, having to figure out and work through as well. And I know that there's been so many spaces where I've been in learning spaces with those souls that have been in my past, you know, and I like to hope that we can all look at where we've been together and just be grateful that we made it through. And you know, that we're all still here. I'm so grateful that, you know, I haven't lost many people in my life, because I think where I'm from, a lot of people push it to the edge because they just haven't been given, you know, the same opportunities as people, as others in this life. And, you know, that's hard to sit with. It's hard to sit with my family and feeling that for them. I feel like, you know, my family haven't really gone for what they could, because, you know, we come from slaves, you know, somewhere we come from slaves, and I can see that pattern so clearly now. And, you know, for them, I want to make it through this bit so I can have more freedom and give back to them somewhere, because they all tried, you know, they all tried their best. And it's been difficult knowing that I'm here to break through that ancestral karma somewhere. It's been difficult having to fully accept this physical vessel that I felt so disconnected from this whole time. And, you know, teams of light have stepped in to help me in terms of my expanse into ether, but I think they're now wanting to come in and to help me face you know, all of these aspects of my 3D life so that I can truly move forward. I think somewhere I've still felt like I'm not worthy and I'm an imposter on this path, and I don't want to feel that anymore, you know. So thank you for being here, for, I guess, witnessing this so much as a confession somewhere. And, you know, I'm going to go away to heal for some time. Everyone, this will be the last video for a little while. I think I need this space. I think I need to truly look at where I find myself right now and, you know, figure out what it is exactly that I want, and how I want to bring that forward to you all. I'm incredibly grateful for all of you being here, and I know that whatever happens from this point, I know I'm worthy to be here somewhere, but I think I'm having to truly accept that at a soul's level. So I'm going to go and integrate, you know, all aspects of me, of soul, of this path, and see what happens after that, everyone. And, you know, I've been circling back around through my own content within the Light Renegade space and, you know, the Diana series, and I just didn't feel ready to bring that information forward. And now re-listening upon it, I think all of that information was speaking directly to me. You know, it's been part of my past somewhere. It's been part of my understanding and my expanse somewhere. And yeah, I'm having to truly look at it all, to say and figure out who exactly I am and why exactly I'm here. I haven't been given too much up until this point. Like I said, I've been given so many others, you know, the understandings of why they are here and their soul's origins, but I've only just been starting to be able to pull back more fragments of understanding of myself. And, you know, I know that this won't be the last of me with the Light Renegades, but I think I'm going to have to just go and heal for some time and to get my questions answered, everyone. And I think guides have been waiting for me to come to this snapping point so that I would be ready to sit and receive the information that's coming forward. I know it's not going to be easy for me to hear. I know there's so many fabrics of this understanding that I'm yet to understand about myself. And, you know, I definitely feel like I've been part of a mind control program somewhere, which I'm just starting to come to terms with. So it's definitely been a fabric of this reality that I just haven't been able to understand just yet. So apologies everyone for, you know, perhaps trauma dumping somewhere, for perhaps bringing information forward that's come from, you know, a very wounded space at times. That was not my intention. I believe that everything that we've put out thus far has been the complete truth. But I know that I've come with my trauma into this space somewhere too, and I think that that is unavoidable to some degree. But I want to make sure that I'm stepping forward with all of my knowledge that I can, as much as I can from my side moving forward. And I have to trust the method of what has happened, why guides have let me do it this way around. But I think I'm just having to come to terms with the truths of everything, and I'm just ready, I think, is what I want to share. So thank you so much to all of those that have been supporting us up until this point. And I'm eternally grateful. I'm eternally grateful for each and every one of you. And, you know, I guess apologies for not showing up with my truth sooner. But I think I just haven't been ready. But that will be all for today. That will be all from me for a little while. But I will be back when it feels right. When I feel like I've gained enough insight into me and my path and my journey in my life that I can step forward in, you know, a higher vibration and higher understanding. But I think, yeah, that's all. And thank you for listening, everyone. And apologies, you know, massive apologies for the triggers, and that I've tried to just bring it forward as most authentically as possible. And, you know, by no means am I condoning a life of drug use, anything like that, but, you know, it did shape me, and I would be lying if I didn't say that. And I've met some amazingly beautiful souls along the way, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So everyone that has been a part of my path and my journey, if you're watching this, you know, I love and appreciate you. I hope that you can forgive me, and I think I'm having to forgive myself, everyone. But before I start crying again, I'm going to go, and I'll be back real soon. But please do take care for now.